Hello again, everyone. I'm Justin Byerjo, and I'm Dr. VR. Please let me introduce you to my wonderful guest, Dan Blair.
Frenemy, colleague.
Everything.
Everything.
XR enthusiasts. So, live from Toronto, Ontario. Here we are in Canada, live at VRTO. Again, Dan, welcome to Dr. VR.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So what brings you to Dr. VR this year? To Dr. VR. Well, yeah, what brings you to Dr. VR, but what brings you to VRTO?
Well, what brings me to Dr. VR is you, my friend.
Yes.
The second that I saw you on the Between Realities podcast recently, I was like, I gotta talk here. We gotta spend some time together. So when you reached out, I was super happy. But what brings me to VRTO is literally my love for VR. Of all of the conferences that I go to every year, VRTO is one of the closest to my heart, largely because I am, and I've said this numerous times on shows recently, the friendliest Canadian. Here, people might fight me on that, but I'll die on that hill. But the thing I like about VRTO is because it's maybe a smaller conference, it's a lot more intimate, you spend more time with people, you can get more into the weeds with the tech. But also, it seems to attract a lot of the people that really know what they want out of this space. And so you don't have to do any preamble. Everyone just seems to know where you're at already, and they just want to get into it.
That's correct.
And that so far has been true every year I've come, and no less true this year.
Absolutely. Actually, it's my first time at VRTO. Probably not my last. I hope not.
We'll force you here next year. Next year is the 10-year anniversary, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. And first year anniversary for me, for my podcast. So lots of things going on.
Lots to celebrate there.
Exactly.
We'll do a show on stage.
Oh, that would be so awesome. Maybe I won't run into so much technical issues. But thanks for your patience, everyone. So, Dan, you had a talk today recently.
I did,
Can you tell us a little bit more about your talk and why you are here? What are you presenting to our Toronto folks?
So it's interesting because despite being in this industry for over a decade now, I really just come to the XR industry conferences to meet with colleagues and see what's new on the horizon. I usually don't expo. I usually don't, I'll talk, but it's maybe a panel or something along those lines. This year is different. I have a booth set up and we're demonstrating an interesting haptic experience that we put together with Titan Haptics. And it is an open source plasma blade.
Wow.
I'm not going to say the word lightsaber. It's a plasma blade.
It's very fancy.
I don't want to get in trouble, so
you won't
use the right word.
This is a safe space.
Okay, good. We'll tell that to all the lawyers too. So at BSDXR, we work with enterprise clients, educators, and commercial entities that want to change the way that they learn, work, or grow in immersive technology. And a lot of the time that means that we're teaching you how to weld or how to use a tool or something that you would consider maybe a less than exciting task. We get around that by building robust experiences around that, but also creating custom peripherals that allow for that to be a more inclusive experience and a more immediately interesting and responsive experience. However, when it comes to building those peripherals, the thought process to getting more people excited about creating those kind of things, it really boiled down to we wanted to create something that was immediately recognized by everybody and gave everybody a starting point to get started in this space themselves. And so around Christmas, Titan Haptics, who's here as well, their marketing lead, the amazing Ashley Huffman, is here. She presented with me on stage for our talk. And various members of their team are here, so it's great to reach out to them if people are interested in haptics, so shout out to Titan Haptics. But they reached out ahead of CES and they said, Dan, we want to build an XR experience for one of our demos, which happened to be a plasma blade. And I said, foolishly, absolutely, I'm 100% on board to build this for you. When do you need it by? And it was like 9 days. CES was like January 6th, and this was like December 27th or something like that. There was not much time.
Wow.
And so they sent me a dev kit, which doesn't take long because I'm out of Winnipeg, so I'm only 2 hours away. And I built the first version of it, which admittedly looked like a bomb. I just had a 3D printed hilt with a Velcro strapped battery connected to it that was far too big for what we needed. And all of the magnetic actuators and all that stuff just hanging off of the edge, and yeah, it looks scary. It would have never made it through airport security. We did make another version of that very rapidly that solved some of those problems. And then over the spring, we looked at that project and thought, how can we take this bigger?
Yeah.
And so we at BSDXR, we work with a lot of high schools, a lot of schools that are bringing their new grads into the immersive technology space. And so we took some of those students that were working on like maybe boring projects, like, oh, we're gonna like do some bricklaying or pipe fitting or whatever, like cool things for what we do with our clients, but like from a student perspective, it's like we didn't want them to work on just a project. Let's give them an innovation project. So like let's make their first experience in the immersive side of things exciting and memorable.
Yeah.
And so I said, here, build me a lightsaber. Sorry, plasma blade.
Plasma blade.
And at this point, people are going to think that's intentional, and it maybe is. So we worked with some great students over the course of the spring, and the game evolved. It became a mixed reality experience that supports all of the various Quest options, and ultimately it became one of the few examples of bringing a custom tracked peripheral to the Quest. Now we had to get a little fancy with how we get around that. We were largely tracking your hands because you can't bring custom objects into the Quest. We can't run custom computer vision models or anything along those lines. But it has evolved. But during the talk today, we announced that the entire thing is now going to be open source. So anybody who wants to build a custom peripheral or wants to dabble with haptics can download this project. So it will be available on our website, bsdxr.com. But it's not quite yet, but come back soon and check. But it is currently available for download on SideQuest, and you can download the STL files.
Nice.
However, the actual game project will become open source, and the actual CAD files for modification will become open source. The reasoning for that is we wanted to make it so that way anybody, with as few steps as possible, could go from nothing to having a peripheral that they helped create. And that means that like maybe it's just minimum viable useful mentality, but that means we wanted to keep it to 4 parts.
Yeah.
So a 3D printed enclosure, a Titan Haptics dev kit, some wires, and a battery. The absolute minimum of what you need. And so far that's worked out really well. There are some janky aspects to it, right? Like, you know, when you hold it in your hand, because it's based off of hand tracking, not the peripheral, it might not be perfectly aligned. Well, you can use our extremely robust calibration technique of shifting your grip with your hand to line it up, and it works pretty good. The way that the experience works right now is as you move the blade through the spatial experience, it drives the haptic engines. So there is no gyroscope, there's no like TMU, there's no accelerometer or anything in the device. All of the interaction on the haptic side is driven by the Quest. So
Really?
Yeah.
So basically, do you mean that the users, whatever the actions the users will do, will create that
Yes.
sort of feedback?
Yeah, so when you start the experience, like we all know what the hum of a plasma blade sounds like, you immediately feel that. But as you move the blade through the experience, or you deflect a blaster bolt, or you slice
Yeah.
through a robot, you
Yeah.
feel that as well.
That's
And that is
fancy.
driven by the Bluetooth connection between the device and the headset. And that is allowing us to connect over Bluetooth serial, so we can actually drive those very specific interactions.
Okay, so open source. Does it mean that other companies who create video games on VR, for instance, will be able to use it for their games, and us users we're going to be able to use it for the games that we already have?
Yeah,
If
so not only that, like the plasma blade is just an example. You
Okay.
could take this and you could change it to anything you want. So, you know, it could be a piece of sports equipment. It could be...
I was gonna ask, yeah.
it could be like a blaster or like a gun
Baseball
or something.
bat,
Exactly.
putter. Yep.
And what's cool is, like, so I'm really focused on leveraging the Titan Haptics options. But, like, in theory, you could work with other motors and stuff along those lines and have a similar but way less high-quality experience.
Yeah.
But they've got some really cool motors as well that are bigger and more powerful. So like if you wanted to have recoil or you wanted to have like a very precise experience, you can have either or both, because you could mix and match these things. At our booth here at the conference, a lot of people might hear this after, but if they're around and they're listening to me talk loudly, we have a bunch of the different modules that they have on hand at the booth, so you can see the different frequencies and stuff like that.
Oh, that's really cool. So, well, these products, what'd you call it again?
The plasma blade.
Exactly. Is it going to be available for people to buy or
It
to
could be. It
purchase?
depends on the level of interest. I really wanted it to be as cheap for people as possible, so I'm inclined to give the files away for free and then tell them where to get the cheap components. And of course, you can get a Titan Haptics dev kit from the titanhaptics.com, I believe is their website. And I strongly encourage that people do, because it is easily the best way to get started with haptics. Their dev kit is Arduino based. It's easy to get started with. Very transparent on that front, and really shows that from the open source mentality, that we're working with companies that are transparent and ready to support this initial movement. Now, the reasoning for open sourcing it is to allow as many people that want to get involved as possible, right? So if you want to modify it, you want to take it, you want to make your own, you want to make something that works with the haptics dev kit, then this is exactly why we did the project. We use the workflows and technology in our commercial projects when we're helping teach you how to weld or how to drive, run a hammer drill, so stuff like that. Cool. We just decided that if we're going to get everyone excited about this stuff, let's just do it in a fun way.
So what inspired you to create something like this? Because as a user myself, as a professor and a researcher in virtual reality and a podcaster, I've always been big on haptics. We have Curtis Hickman here who works for The Void, and I remember wearing the haptic vest, wearing stuff that would make you feel like you're getting shot at, Yeah. So is it something that's going to become more accessible for
I think that this is
everyone?
the mentality, right? It's a reduction in the cost when it comes to the hardware, and it's a mentality that makes it open to everybody. Now, what got me interested in this? Well, one, I'm a huge nerd, so I got it.
Well, this room is filled.
Yeah, I'm filled with my people here. So, to the surprise of nobody, I like the concept of plasma blades and haptics. Now, it's Ashley's fault that I got so into haptics, because I started paying a lot more attention when listening to her talks and listening to the podcast and stuff along those lines, that the best haptics, and I think I just got this from her, and now I just regurgitate it everywhere I go. But the best haptic experiences are the experiences that you didn't realize that there was haptics. Everything just felt natural.
Yes.
And that's why I like working with these. And so I've done interesting experiences where I'm simulating a heartbeat or stuff along those lines, and it is the only modules that I've worked with that feel realistic in that sense. A lot of when you think when people think about haptics experience, they think of Rumble, right? They think of a controller rumbler. The modules that Titan Haptics has created are completely different. It doesn't move the same way. It's not like an off-kilter disc that's spinning and creating a rumble effect. I think of the Nintendo 64 controllers, but you should probably think of more modern stuff than that.
The Rumble Pack, remember?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you literally in the expansion slot on the controller.
Good old days.
It's that or a camera. I think they had a camera attachment. I don't know what else. Oh, memory cards.
Yeah, but I think haptics will get more people almost interested in VR. Also, the issue with proprioception, you want to do something and you don't get the response from what you're doing.
Yeah.
Add the feedback, that's going to be next level.
Yeah, from a design philosophy,
yes.
I like to think if I see things in the world, I need to be able to interact with them. So even if I'm teaching you how to use a chainsaw, but you're in you look at the environment, so maybe you're getting ready, right? So you're in a PPE scene and you're learning all the equipment that you got to put on. So I put on my vest, my hard hat, my chainsaw pants, which I didn't know existed until I literally made Chainsaw VR, and your boots and all that. If there's anything else on the table, I like to work under the mentality that I need to be able to also pick that up.
Of course.
It might not clip to me, but if there's a can of Coke on the table, I want to be able to reach out and pick it up, crumple it maybe, all those things. Now I want that experience to translate back to me as the user. Now, the reason I'm so invested in this right now is we have this shift into more of a world of mixed reality and a lot more hand-based interactions. Now, that's not brand new for us at BSDXR. We've been working with the HoloLens, the HoloLens 1, all these things for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And none of those have controllers. And so if we need to feel something in the experience, we have to work with some sort of haptic interface, and that might be gloves. So for gloves, I love working with Contact CI, so big shout out to them. Craig and his team, fantastic Maestro gloves. But we've also worked with vests. We've also worked with ultrasonic haptic devices. So Ultra Leap before Leap Motion was acquired by Ultra Haptics.
Yep.
I was working with both companies. So on the hand tracking front, I was working with the Leap Motion module. But I don't know if I've never actually met anyone else that has one of these. But I have one of the original ultrasonic haptics modules where like it uses the air. So it's like speakers that you can totally hear them, but they say you can't hear them. But this is years ago, so they'll give them a pass. But you can feel in midair, and like so you imagine like you put your hand over something, you get like a scanner sensation. I've got a couple knockoff versions of that I've kickstarted over the years that are okay. But like those like mid-air haptics experiences are something that like have sort of eluded us for a long time.
Yeah.
And as we go to a more like controller-free and hands-forward industry, now that like a lot of our VR options are going mixed reality, and a lot of our mixed reality content is based around hands and natural interaction, we've lost our ability to have haptics then. So we need to be able to feel the world for what it is and have it like feel realistic and respond to me. But like if I pick up a tool as part of that workflow, it should interact in the world as I would expect.
Absolutely.
And so like the plasma blade is interesting because it's fully custom. Now in real life, like a proper experience, I should just be able to pick up any drill I have, and that becomes my controller.
Yeah.
And it would have perfect haptics. It feels like a drill because it is a drill. We're nowhere near that. And so the reason for needing to create something is because we just don't have the capacity to go down that path yet.
Yeah, I agree.
Now some headsets do, I should say. Like if you look at like
sure.
Big shout out to Stan and the Lynx team. I feel like I'm mentioning them on a podcast like every other week at this point. But like that is by far the best headset for doing this work right now, because it is one of the few options that exist where we can have full access to the hardware. We can work with like the cameras at a low level, and you can train custom computer vision models and track stuff. But other than that, the only way to really bring devices into the space is to use an option that has a self-tracking tracker, which would be anything from like the Vive side of things, like back to the Vive trackers and the self-tracking tracker, or some of the new tech that's probably coming down the pipe that like may or may not ever be announced.
Very cheesy question. What would be your dream-like haptic device?
So again, it's something that you don't know is really there.
Yeah.
Right? Like we need it would be some sort of like nervous system stimulation that like is baked into the headset. So something on like the brain interface side of things. So
yeah,
like,
of course.
You look at like OpenBCI and like their Gallia project would be like the start of that. Like Gabe and Valve have spent a lot of time looking into that. Although the Gallia, I noticed, does come with a VRTO now instead of a Vive Pro, so it's maybe something happened. So whatever. It's not the point of this podcast. We'll do a deep dive later.
Well, yeah.
But like I think that's the only way to really get a proper experience. Now from like a haptic experience, best case scenario for like a tool, like I want this thing in front of me to react to the world around me. We're partially there. Like the ability to bring like a haptics experience into a device is there. What isn't there is being able to bring that device into the digital world and track it in like a spatial experience. And so like, I think of like controlling heavy machinery. So like we worked on like a scissor lift simulator a while back, and it has a really nice controller. That controller is tracked with a Vive tracker, and it works great. But if we were to bring that to like a standalone experience, we have to take into consideration the setup process, and it's unlikely that we're going to track that in the experience. So we would probably leverage mixed reality in the beginning of that experience to position it properly. And so, like, best case scenario, I would be able to say, like, this device is now a tracked object. And it's a tracked object that I know I can trigger a haptic experience on, or it is a real object that is going to, like, feel and sound as accurate as possible. But, like, that comes down to, like, the presence side of things, right? So, like, we need to, like, figure out how to better track the world around us and the objects around us to have that as a robust workflow. So for now, we just hack it by tracking your hands.
That's fascinating. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's like a weird problem, and it's like a problem that you don't think about you needing to solve until you're like, yeah, I really would like to pick up these AirPods in VR. It's like,
oh, that's cool.
You can't do it, right? It's not possible until you start thinking like, okay, well, what is possible? Well, I can attach a controller to it. Yeah. But that sucks. Like that's not.
I agree.
That's not
takes away from the immersion of it.
Yeah, and it doesn't weigh properly, or like it doesn't look good, or doesn't feel good. And like it works, but it's not like the best.
I agree. Dan, where can we follow you?
So I'm on Twitter, CMDanCA. You can find my company at bsdxr.com. I strongly encourage that everybody listening goes and checks out the Virtual World Society. I'm proudly on the member of the board of directors there. We're trying to be that coalition point for ethical discussions and keeping humans at the center of emerging and immersive technology as we progress as an industry.
Nice.
And we're always looking for people to join. We're always looking for support. And we're always building community. We're happy to have you as part of that community.
Thank you.
And so that's virtualworldsociety.org.
Thank you, Dan. It was such a pleasure to have you on Dr. VR today.
Thank you for having me on.
And enjoy your time at VRTO.
Cheers, you too.
So please stay tuned for more interviews live from VRTO. See you soon, everyone.